The modern monarchy is an illusion of permanence built entirely on survival. And in the winter of 2022, Queen Margrethe of Denmark proved just how ruthless that survival can be. With a single, sharp stroke of her pen, she stripped four of her own grandchildren of their prince and princess titles, sending shockwaves through the House of Glucksburg and exposing a deep, fractured rift within the royal family. The palace called it modernization, but behind closed doors, it felt like an emotional execution. Now, as the dust finally settles, a far more dangerous question looms over the Danish crown. Will the newly crowned King Frederik have the courage to apply that exact same brutal standard to his own flesh and blood, or will the temptations of power force him to play favorites and protect his own children at all costs? To understand the high-stakes game currently playing out behind the palace gates, we must look closer at the shifting tides of the monarchy, a saga we continuously break down right here on Royal Scope. When Prince Joachim's children lost their titles overnight, it wasn't just a personal tragedy for a sidelined branch of the family. It was a calculated warning shot to the entire institution. Right in the epicenter of that public relations storm, the woman who is now Queen Mary stepped forward to deliver one of the most loaded, chilling lines in recent royal history. She looked at the cameras and calmly stated that they would also look at their own children's titles when the time comes. For Princess Isabella, Prince Vincent, and Princess Josephine, those words were a quiet countdown clock, a sign that the looming shadow of the chopping block was already moving toward their side of the family. The Danish monarchy is shrinking on purpose, operating exactly like a Fortune 500 company downsizing its assets before an economic crisis hits. The strategy is cold, efficient, and lethal for those on the periphery. You protect the essential players who carry the main workload, and you quietly move everyone else into the background to keep the operation cleaner, cheaper, and entirely focused on survival. But as we look at the palace today, the grand strategy seems to have hit a sudden, unexpected detour. Frederik is now sitting on the throne, Mary is his queen, and all four of their children still retain their full, glittering royal titles without a single mark against them. Crown Prince Christian stands secure as the undisputed heir, while 19-year-old Princess Isabella carries herself with an increasingly sharp, independent poise that commands public attention. Meanwhile, the 15-year-old twins, Vincent and Josephine, are fresh from their confirmation, radiating a youthful, vibrant energy that has captivated the Danish public. On the surface, the family presents an unshakable, unified front on the palace balcony, but history teaches us that the brightest smiles often hide the deepest calculations. King Frederik has chosen a path completely distinct from his mother's uncompromising rule, replacing the swift, decisive strike with the patient strategy of a reconciler. In his first years on the throne, he has actively worked to heal the bleeding wounds left behind by Margrethe, quietly restoring honors to his exiled nephews, Nikolai and Felix, and orchestrating public appearances filled with a genuine warmth that was entirely missing just a few years ago. It is a masterclass in royal damage control, but this sudden pivot toward family unity hides a much deeper, more complex game that will determine the absolute future of the crown. This calculated gentleness should never be mistaken for weakness, because in the theater of royalty, timing is everything, and stripping titles from his own children right now would be absolute political and emotional suicide. The Danish public harbors a profound affection for this specific family because they feel fiercely, authentically approachable. They love seeing Frederik out jogging through the streets of Copenhagen like a regular father. They respect Mary for her warm, no-nonsense directness, and they have watched these children grow up in the blinding spotlight while somehow maintaining a sense of grounded normality. Abruptly yanking titles away from Isabella or the twins right now would completely fracture that precious, hard-earned connection with the people, transforming a beloved family into an elite corporate entity. Yet, the long game reveals an inevitable truth that no amount of parental protection can fully shield them from. By the time the 2030s arrive and Crown Prince Christian prepares to ascend the throne, a further slimming of the royal house becomes a mathematical certainty. Only the direct senior line will retain full state funding and the crushing weight of official constitutional duties. If Frederik wants to secure the survival of his house, a quiet compromise is already being drawn up behind closed doors, one that will fundamentally alter the destinies of his younger children. The strategy taking shape mimics the successful transitions we have seen sweep through the royal houses of Sweden and Norway. There will be no explosive press conferences, no public banishments, and no sudden executions of status. Instead, the palace is preparing for a gradual, silent shift toward long-term sustainability. If you look closely at the unique personalities of the younger siblings, this looming transition might actually become their greatest asset rather than their punishment. Prince Vincent, with his profound love for sports and naturally outgoing, charismatic personality, could easily thrive as a dynamic young man with royal blood but completely free from the suffocating prison of endless official engagements. Princess Josephine, bright and fiercely expressive, possesses the raw potential to build an entirely self-made path in the modern world. Even Princess Isabella is already demonstrating a quiet, formidable independence that suggests she is more than ready to define herself outside the rigid boundaries of the state. This is not a cruel demotion in the traditional sense, but rather a gift of absolute freedom wrapped in pragmatic Danish practicality. Frederick and Mary have consistently proven that they are fiercely protective parents first and monarchs second. When they abruptly and quietly pulled Isabella from a prestigious boarding school the moment the environment no longer felt safe or right, that single, monumental decision spoke volumes about where their true loyalty lies. They do not sacrifice their children for the sake of ancient optics. They adapt, they shield, and they pivot. Are we witnessing a king playing favorites to protect his own blood, or is this the calm before a necessary storm? If you want to stay ahead of the curve as this royal chess match unfolds, make sure to hit that subscribe button right now and join the conversation in the comments below with your thoughts on whether King Frederik will eventually be forced to demote his own children. With the family looking tighter and more resilient than it has in over a decade, unleashing an internal war over titles right now would look like completely unnecessary, self-inflicted damage to a crown that has finally found its footing. The ultimate question facing the House of Glucksburg is no longer whether radical change is coming to the palace, but rather how gentle and sophisticated Frederik chooses to be when the axe finally falls. The Danish monarchy has successfully survived for over 1,000 years because it possesses an unparalleled, almost evolutionary instinct for adaptation. Queen Margrethe ignited the fires of modernization with a brutal, necessary spark, but King Frederik is steering the ship into the future with a much steadier, far more compassionate hand. He will almost certainly refuse to touch the titles of Isabella, Vincent, and Josephine in the short term, while the painful scars of 2022 are still visibly healing in the public eye. But as the decade marches on, cold, hard practicality will inevitably win the day. The future demands a smaller, sharper, and hyper-focused royal house that pours its entire energy into the immediate heir while keeping the financial burden on the public strictly reasonable. When that day finally arrives, and the titles are quietly altered, it won't be a case of a father playing favorites or a king betraying his own house. It will be the ultimate act of a modern monarch looking directly into the eyes of the future, facing reality, and ensuring his family survives for another 1,000 years.